Hey, statistics students, I wanted to, right before the exam, exam number 1, it is by Tuesday at midnight, right? By Tuesday at midnight, you got to take exam number 1. There's just 2 topics I wanted to make sure were clear for you. I wasn't sure they were 100% clear. Number 1 is standard deviation. Just want to make sure that you, I know you know how to calculate it probably, I'm assuming. You calculate on the TI, right? You put the data into L1, and then you hit the calculate button. And so I know you can go through the steps to calculate that, but what I want to give you is the feel. Like, what is it? I want to make sure, because there's both how you calculate it. You know, you hit the stat button on the TI and put the data in L1, and then hit the stat button again when you're done, and go over to calc and hit enter a couple of times, and you'll get your standard deviation. Your S sub x is your standard deviation. But here's my question: what is it? Okay, so what is it? Because I'm going to ask you on the real exam not only to calculate a standard deviation, but I'll test that you understand what it really is, like a feel. I want you to feel it. Like, what is it? Let me give you an example. Suppose on this next exam that we're all about to take, let's suppose the average comes out to be about 80%. I'm hoping for a good average like 80%. Okay, but then, of course, some people get even better than that, you know, and a little bit better. And some people get a little bit worse than that. Some people get way better. Some people, hopefully not too many, get way worse. Okay, so there's an average, and then there's a spread around the average. So how spread out are the data? That's standard deviation. Standard deviation, what it is average distance from the middle. So I want you to feel that. Standard deviation, what it is average distance from the middle. What do I mean? Here's the middle, you know, the average. So some people are close to the middle. Some people are really far from the middle. Some are close below. Some are far below. But what is the average distance from the middle? I don't know, maybe right about there, maybe that's, so that would be the standard. Well, the standard deviation would be how far that arrow goes and how far that one, same one, right? That the distance of those arrows, that is the standard deviation, because it looks like that's the average distance from the middle. So basically, if you have this 2 exams, let me give 2 different examples. Both have an average of 80, let's say. Okay, and this one, the data's really, they had an average of 80, the middle's 80. So the middle's 80, and everybody got right around that score. But this one, the middle's 80, and they got super far above and below that. So the same middle on both these tests, let's say this is exam 1 and this is exam 2. So exam 1, this has a low standard deviation. This has a high standard deviation, because what is standard deviation again? Average distance from the middle. So average distance from the middle here is high, isn't it? It's a high standard deviation. Here, the average distance from the middle is low. Everybody's close to them. They're not very far from the middle on average. So standard deviation. Standard means like average. Standard deviation. What is deviation? You know, I think about what is a social deviant. We use that word sometimes. Somebody who acts different than the normal person acts, right? Their behavior deviates, right, from the normal. It is, you know, different than normal. So deviation means distance from the middle. So standard deviation means average distance from the middle. Whether it's above or below, it doesn't matter. Just average distance from the middle. That's standard deviation. So for example, what if I was to give you a data set in which the numbers were like, let's say the middle is 80, and this is 78, 79, 82, 81. They're all, that would be a low standard deviation. They're all close. Whereas what if I give you 80 and I give you like 40, 50, and like 100, whatever. This would be a high standard deviation because these are really spread out, aren't they? 80 is the middle, but then there's some numbers really way below, really way above, high standard deviation. Or what if I was to give you, here's an example, some averages that are all the same? What if I said, yeah, 4 people took the test, they all got the same score, 80, 80, 80, 80. What's the standard deviation? It's 0, huh? Because all the numbers are the same. There's no deviation. Nobody's different than the middle. The average distance from the middle is 0. They're all right on the middle, right? If you did a graph of this, they'd all be right here at 80. So their distance, they are the middle, they're right on the middle. The distance from the middle, the average distance from the middle is 0. There's no jumping from the middle. The standard deviation is the average distance from the middle. So if they're all right on the middle, the average distance from the middle is 0. If they're spread out really far from the middle, like these examples, it's a high standard deviation. If they're close to the middle, all bunched up close to the middle, that's a low standard deviation. Like this, they're all close to 80. It's a low standard deviation because standard deviation is average distance from the middle. Okay, one other concept. This is number 2, and that is percentile. Again, I just want to make sure you have the feel. Percentile, it means percent below. It's not exactly the same as percent. It means percent below. So, for example, if you have a baby, when you have a brand new baby, I've had 5 of them. When you have a or my wife has, I should say. When you have a brand new baby, they'll tell you the height and the weight percentile for your baby. It's like they'll say your baby is at, let's say, the 30 percentile in weight, and they'll say the height of your baby is at the, let's say, 60 percentile. So what does that mean? That means if you were to lay out all babies, if you're at the 30 percentile, it means you're 30% of the way through all babies' weights, right? Which means what? 30% are below you, right? This is the part below. Like 30% of all babies have lower weights than your baby. And then down here, if you do, this is weights, baby weights, and this is baby heights or lengths. If you're at the 60, so here's halfway, you're about right there. That means 60% are below you. More than half of all babies are not as tall as your baby. Your baby is 60% of the way through the data of heights, but only 30% in weight. Your baby's tall and doesn't weigh much. So does that make sense? So percentile means percent below, right? It's the percent to the left. It's the percent to the left. The percent of all other babies less than your baby in weight or less than your baby in height. Percentile means percent below or percent less. Percent to the left. How about that? Those are all the same thing. It's the percent that are below you. So if you're at the 60 percentile, you're more than half. 50 percentile would be the middle, right? If you're at the 50 percentile, you're right in the middle. If you're at the 60 percentile, you're past the middle. 60% are below you. If you're at the 30 percentile, 30% are below you. I hope that helps for exam number 1.